It's 1979, and this man, President Jimmy Carter, is in office. And, well, things aren't looking too good for him. That is because the economy was going through a little something called stagflation. If you don't know what stagflation is, it is basically when prices are going way up at the same time when wages and the overall economy is going way down. So it's pretty understandable when people were pretty angry. So when a man named Ronald Reagan came along and said he could fix everything, people were like, hooray, let's elect this guy and he'll solve all of our problems. So in the 1980 election, Reagan proceeds to kick butt and win in a landslide. Okay, so Reagan is president now. The problem is he now has to deal with an economy that is trending towards Great Depression levels. In other words, he needs an economic plan to solve all this. The economic plan that he would impose over his 8 years in office is known as Reaganomics, which is obviously the topic of this video. Because Reagan, a Republican, was such a popular president, you might see modern Republicans use Reaganomics as a base for most of their economic plans and policies. By now you're thinking, well, how exactly does Reaganomics work? Well, it is heavily based off of an idea called the trickle-down theory. The trickle-down theory, and basically all of Reaganomics, kind of works like this. It is when you lower taxes for corporations, these companies keep more of the money they earn. They use this extra money to reinvest back into their company, which would lead to higher wages for workers. This reinvestment allows the company to grow even more, which obviously leads to more people being hired. This leads to more people having more disposable income, which leads to more spending and a better economy and much more economic growth. If that sounded a little too complicated, just think of it like this. Reaganomics is basically saying that taxes and more government regulation are not good. Companies should decide on their own what they should do with their money, and they believe this will lead to much higher economic growth and prosperity for all Americans. You see, trickle-down economics is a good idea in theory. However, the actual results of trickle-down have been heavily debated for years. Most Republicans say that trickle-down is good because hard-working people and middle-class members get a tax cut and therefore get to keep most of their money, which means they spend more, which obviously leads to economic growth. However, you might also see lots of Democrats saying that trickle-down is not good because they say that tax cuts and looser regulation means that companies can do whatever they want. They don't actually reinvest back into their company, into their workers, and the top 1% keeps all of the benefits, and tax cuts only help them, and basically the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Getting into the specifics of what Reagan actually did, during his presidency, his 8 years in office, people making over $29,750 did in fact receive an income tax cut from 73% all the way down to 28%. Reagan also in 1981 lowered the capital gains tax from 28% to 20%. However, he actually eventually did raise the capital gains tax back to 28% in 1986. Okay, now let's see the actual results of his economic policies in place. So as you can see on this chart, at the lowest point, that is basically where Reagan took office, and as you can see when the chart cuts off, that is when Reagan left office. Obviously, as you can see, economic growth was very high, and other things such as unemployment and inflation all went down. However, it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows for Reaganomics. As you can see, the budget deficit for the US went up drastically. I know this chart might seem a little bit confusing, but let me break it down for you. As you can see, the chart on the left represents the 6 years before Reagan's presidency. As you can see, the deficit never exceeded $75 billion. However, when you look at the chart on the right, which is during Reagan's presidency, you can see that the deficit exceeded $200 billion 3 times. In other words, the deficit under Reagan got out of control, and the US national debt also got completely out of control. So as you can see, there are lots of pros and cons about Reaganomics. conservatives who support Reaganomics say that it saved our economy, created millions of jobs, and lowered unemployment and inflation, and that the 80s, aka the years that Reagan was president, are proof that Reaganomics worked. However, liberals and progressives who oppose Reaganomics say that Reaganomics simply made the rich richer, the poor poorer, it skyrocketed our debt and deficit, and it was the cause of the 1992 recession, which was really bad. And simply, their main argument is that why Reaganomics is bad is because though it might have been in the 80s been great, it is a horrible long-term economic plan. Again, there are pros and cons on both sides of the aisle, but one thing I think we can all agree to thank Ronald Reagan for is that he forced Jelly Belly to create blueberry jelly beans. Anyways, I've recorded this video, tried to record this video so many times, and I'm tired, and I just want to get this over with. Okay, bye.